Errors arising out of commercial lease transactions can cost the indemnity program a lot of money, as losses can be incurred over many years. So to help you reduce the risk to the fund, yourself, and to your clients, I'll describe the 5 mistakes we see most often. First, failing to properly renew a lease or renewing by the deadline stipulated in the lease. Generally, tenants themselves will take on this responsibility, and I encourage you to make it clear in writing to your clients that they, not you, are responsible for lease renewals. Often, however, the tenant will retain a lawyer to draft and send the notice to renew to the landlord. We've received claims where the lawyer fails to follow the exact renewal process set out in the lease, such as sending it to the wrong address, sending it late, or attaching conditions to the renewal. Remember, the actual renewal notice must be unconditional. A landlord who can relet the space to a different tenant at a higher rate or has plans to demolish or sell the property will attempt to take advantage of any slip-up in the process to further its interests. Closely review the lease and any amendments to ensure that you get it right. Second, dealing with a defaulting tenant. A landlord may come to you facing a defaulting tenant and wanting to relet the premises to someone else. The landlord must determine whether it wishes to affirm the lease after a default and take remedies consistent with that election, or whether it wishes to terminate the lease and seek remedies in line with that election. Once made, the landlord must ensure that the steps it takes are consistent with that election. For example, if the landlord decides to continue with the lease, it may do so by affirming the lease and suing for rent, or affirming the lease and reletting on the tenant's account, or distraining. However, the landlord must not do or say anything that is inconsistent with keeping the lease alive. Similarly, if the landlord decides to terminate the lease, it must adhere strictly to the requirements. For example, the notice requirements and the rectification periods outlined in the lease. If the landlord acts inconsistently with its intention to terminate, it may be found to have inadvertently waived forfeiture and reinstated the lease. This can be a tricky area, and if you're not familiar with the law, don't dabble. Refer your client to a lawyer who is more experienced. Next, we have long-term leases and PTT. Under the Property Transfer Tax Act, if a lease of more than 30 years, or with a shorter term that's extended to a term of more than 30 years, is registered in the Land Title Office, it will attract PTT. We've had claims reported where a registered lease is renewed, perhaps several times, leading to uninterrupted possession of the premises by the tenant for more than 30 years. That can result in an unpleasant surprise from the PTT office in the form of a tax bill. Ensure your clients are aware of this provision so they know the potential costs they face. Further, consider if there may be a workaround depending upon the manner in which a lease is extended. For example, a simple renewal versus a modification of terms. Fourth, notices of interest. Don't forget that if your landlord, owner, or client wants to avoid lien liability for unauthorized work performed by their tenant, they should consider filing a notice of interest at the Land Title Office. Under the Builder's Lien Act, a landlord can file a notice against title advising that its interest in the land will not be bound by a lien claim unless the work was undertaken at the express request of the owner. Finally, drafting mistakes. On the screen, we have listed a variety of examples that we've dealt with. These are the simple drafting oopses that we all make. The good news? They can all be easily avoided if you give your file and your lease agreement just a bit of extra attention.